Okay. It appears that the session yesterday, the recording didn't go through, so I'm going to make another version of it today. But just a couple of things before we get started that I wanted to mention. First off, we've had a situation in the last semester or so where there's been a couple of indications of fairly major plagiarism of previous works that have not been acknowledged, and in one case, a direct copy of another student's work. Now, at universities, we encourage you to do as much research and to gather as much information as you can, but part of the deal for that is that you acknowledge the sources of information that you get. And the punishment for, blatant plagiarism is sort of runs across three lines. The first level is where students, perhaps in their first year of university or first semester, don't really know how to, cite information properly, and using Microsoft Word and that sort of thing, it makes it a lot easier. But, you should learn and follow up on proper referencing as part of your sort of overall activities while you're at university. And even when you go into the business world, to acknowledge the information that's been put in by other people is a critical part of it. But that's not so bad if students, don't put the citations in correctly, or they, don't put the proper format in or whatever. That can be learned over a period of time. And normally by a second semester or so, students have an understanding of what is required in terms of acknowledging previous work. Probably one of the biggest issues normally that shows up on Turnitin is the fact that students have used inverted commas rather than quotation marks for quotations. The next level is where students basically paraphrase information, but unfortunately they're not particularly good at it, and therefore they, they use enough words from a source where it obviously appears on a match, and clearly they've taken information from another source and they've not acknowledged it. So that is really plagiarism. But when we go further than that, students sometimes show their assignments to other students, or find assignments on the same content and same subject from other students. And in that case, quite often the issue is that because they find this other information, they think it's valid because it's on topic, and then they copy that information across and they don't acknowledge it. Now, that is really plagiarism. And a case just recently at Torrens where we basically punished the student who had provided their assignment to another student, but the student who actually used it and submitted it was taken out of that unit. In other words, they were failed in that unit and had to do the unit again. So please be aware of the fact that this is being monitored. The reason we get you to submit your assignments to Turnitin first is so that we can make sure that you are, using material correctly and you're using your own words on a lot of the things that you're talking about. But understand that the university takes plagiarism very seriously, and if you are breaching those things, you will potentially be kicked out of the subject. What was worse than that is if you get caught doing that twice, you'll probably get kicked out of the course. So, it has a financial impact as well as a academic impact, and so just be aware of that. Anyway, hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Just want to also mention in terms of housekeeping that we have your first assignment due quite soon, and so please make sure you get onto that and make sure that you do a good job of your new sport. It's due this week. Please don't leave it until Sunday night to submit. Make sure that you get it in before that. Make it look tidy. Make sure you follow the instructions that are there in terms of the content that is required, and that will get us through to getting you a reasonable mark. And the thing about it is, you do a good job on this part. The second part is a lot easier because you've already got the nucleus and the bones of it there, and you've just got to add on some other components. So please be creative in terms of your sport, but hopefully you're all pretty close to getting it completed according to some of your leaders. So that's a great thing. All right, so just continuing on to this, and risk management is part of the first component of your assignment, so it's an important element. Going about sort of processing the risk management environment is an important thing. And as you move up in the size of your organisation, it's quite critical that you understand the impact of different risks. So we've got to understand risk management objectives, the identification, the measurement and evaluation, how we treat risk, and putting together an implementation plan is a very important part of that. So the program steps, detailed steps in risk management, identify the applicable areas of concern, and we'll go through each of those as we go through. Look at some specific risk exposures in each category and the impact that those things will have and the likelihood that they may happen, and then implement a plan to carry out the selected method to minimise that risk, monitor it, and then evaluate what you've been able to do. So step one is about developing a risk management program. And the areas of risk are basically public liability caused by negligence. So your responsibility for people that are visiting your facility and other things. Public liability excluding negligence, where other things happen that you've done your best to try and resolve issues, but people are injured on site or other incidents. Business operations, which is mostly financial, and property exposures. So accidents, security contracts, personnel, financial, natural disasters, speculative risks like strikes that might impact people being able to get to your facility, terrorist threats, design and construction issues, and etc. The purpose of selecting the areas of concern is to provide risk reviewers with a reference or for finding specific risk exposures. And depending on the size of the organisation, these things can be in play. There's no doubt about that. So one of the things about this is that, we've got a particular mission for our organisation and objectives in terms of growing the sport. As a national body, you want to grow the sport, you want more participation, you want to get kids involved in all these activities, and so they will come on and become senior players, then they'll become spectators and supporters and loyal club members and everything else. So if it's a much smaller organisation, our approach to risk might be just making sure that we've got insurance against anybody hurting themselves, because all we're doing is using a local park. So you've got to consider the size of the organisation and the likelihood of different things impacting us. We've got to fit the risk strategy to our own plans and the culture that we have within that organisation. I would think the risk categories in cage fighting are probably quite different in terms of participants from other sports like lawn bowls. So you've got to consider what things you put in place to at least have some protection for the people that are participating. A well-funded startup or research and development company might accept a greater level of risk than a small business. And, if they've got a bit of cash in the bank, well, they probably feel okay about the things that they're going to do and are willing to take a financial risk to do that. Next thing we have to do is identify the specific exposures in each category. So we go through, we talk to people that work for us or specialists in those areas. We do loss analysis questionnaires, what would happen if this happened, physical site inspections for facilities, and look at our business plans in terms of our financial activities. Once we've identified those risks, you can get checklists. Insurance companies have them. The web, get them off the web. Risk analysis guidebooks and industry forums can provide us with information, the things that we should be considering in terms of these sorts of things, and so that's fairly straightforward. Step 3 is to estimate the probable impact of the risk and classify it. So we've got to assess each risk on the risk master list and estimate the level of loss that each risk occurrence may impose. So some of the assessment tools look at the frequency of these things potentially happening. We talk in residential terms about the 100-year flood or the 100-year storm and this type of thing. Now those 100-year storms can happen twice in a month. Excuse me.